Hi everyone, this is fresh out of bed, that happy Viking, and this is my set review of M21 for Gentry. As you will notice, this is a completely unedited version of a complete set review. If you want to see a highlight set review looking only at the most interesting cards, go look at the other video. This is more for people that are looking for all the information. Core set 21 set review for Gentry. We'll be looking at all the cards that I think are interesting for Gentry specifically. I might refer to limited or standard at some point, but the focus is very much going to be on Gentry. So first and foremost, we have the common dual lands that gain 1 life coming back. It's a big deal for Gentry. It's great to have as a baseline, and barring a 2-month scare, a version of these lands, whether or not they're guild gates or giving you no life or 1 life, has always been available, and it's been super important. So happy to see these coming back. Sky Scanner is interesting for the mono blue artifact decks that we have seen Kobe play at some point. You can still come in and walk through, that's okay, don't worry. Silent Dart's a reprint that we don't really care about. Short Sword, we've had it around. There were some interesting interactions happening with Mentor when we had that, but just without... well, we still have a lot of the Mentor because Boros is still around, but even then it wasn't that interesting, so I don't expect much from it. Prismite filler. Forgotten Sentinel filler, Epitaph Golem could have some interactions. If we do find some things, well, let's actually zoom this in a bit for you guys, so you hopefully can actually read the cards as well, instead of seeing them as these tiny little thingamajigasuses. That's apparently all I can cheat a little bit more. Zoom. Cheat a little bit more. Zoom. Okay, keep going. Yes. Zoom. There we go. That should be better. So Epitaph Golem, barring any cool interactions, we'll see it. Track down is a ponder for 2 mana. We'll see it when we get there. Chrome a Replicator, 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, if you control 2 or more non-land, non-token permanents with the same name as one another, create a 4/4 colorless construct artifact creature token. So again, that is support for that mono blue artifacts deck that we've seen fall by the wayside. It's getting a bunch of new tools, so that's going to be super interesting. Track down, scry 3, then reveal the top card. If it's a creature card or land card, draw a card. There's no shuffle effect in there, but other than that, in a bunch of decks, this is most likely a near ponder that is indeed true. Dude, I was anticipating you would skim over the last 2 cards in 5 seconds. With these 2? No, like this one, meh, but this one is actually going to be interesting. You can get this one out surprisingly quickly and get it enabled. Titanic Growth, almost irrelevant. We don't really want to go pump spells in green. Thrashing Brontodon, great body, great utility coming back. Snare Spinner looks better than it actually is, because the creatures you really need to interact with will grow to 4 toughness pretty quickly. Skyway Sniper, 1 mana 1/2 reach, deals 1 damage to target creature with flying. Not worth the uncommon. Doesn't keep up with flying token decks well enough to be relevant. Test and Training is a reprint. It's good, they just don't understand why they reprint it in the same rotation. Give it to me, put it in all my ramp decks. Yep. Run Afoul. Might be interesting if we see more heavy protection builds with flyers. Currently, the only reason you might want this is because it can kill a Dream Trawler, but it also goes through a bunch of defenses if Fairy Vandal Staggering Insight would become a thing. I don't think it will. I've been the only one running the deck and struggling with it. Return to Nature, reprinted. Run afoul is located on Ixalan, right? Yes. Core sets usually don't have a location, but this does look like a lot of Ixalan cards. Return to Nature, reprint, whatever. Portcullis Vine is interesting because it opens up synergy for a Defender Matters deck together with High Alert and some of the other cards that let you deal damage with your toughness and even let defenders attack. So might pull that deck into the limelight, but I don't really see it happening. Ornery Dilophosaur is a 4-mana 2/2. When it attacks, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, gets +2/+2. I don't think this is good enough. Like for 4 mana at common, you can have the 4/4 wolf that has trample and gives you food. As at common, it doesn't depend on other things. Meh, life goes on. Could be a sideboard card if mono red does grow to be out of control. Most cards from M21 go back to a location that was used in the past. Correct. Run afoul does not have chicken in the art. Flavor fail. Correct. Hunter's Edge, not good enough. Gnarled Sage, interesting but overcosted for Gentry. Volcanic Geyser might be interesting if for wilderness reclamation decks. I do think they'll start looking at this card. Turret Ogre, probably not good enough for the 4-power Matters deck. Yeah, not good enough. Turn to Slag, too slow. Equipment not relevant enough to make this a card. Thrill, reprinted while in Standard. Don't know why it's here. Blah blah blah. Limited format. Sure Strike, Fringe Play will stay the same. Spellgorger weird. There's just way better options for blue-red spells. Shock is shock. It's shock. It gets played. Period. Scorching Dragonfire, interesting removal option. Currently, recursion isn't that relevant, but the fact that this hits Planeswalkers probably just puts it on the best red removal spell we still have. A lot of people are running Fire Prophecy over that, but I'm not sure if that's always correct. The cycling in Fire Prophecy does help it a lot, especially if you have some synergy with second draw of it. Pitchburn Devils is interesting but overcosted for Gentry. Onaki Ogre is a nice enabler for 4-power Matters, but an unexciting one. Hobble Fiend, 2/1 trample, sack another creature, put a counter on Hobble Fiend. I think might be good enough for Rakdos Sacrifice, because that deck does struggle a little bit with finding a good sacrifice outlet, and this at common really gives it an aggressive edge. I think it might happen. I don't think it's going to be that impressive. Against some opponents, having something that keeps on growing is pretty bonkers, though. Goblin Wizardry, I find very interesting because it's an instant and they do have prowess. So spells decks might look into this. I don't think at the moment, because we have so many good blue-red spells decks already, but after that, this might be a thing. Furor of the Bitten, a permanent bonus for attacking, something mono red that is attack crazy. Might want to play this. There is some alternative play use in getting rid of a utility creature or a blocker by forcing it to attack or activate. With Murder at common, I doubt it. Yeah, exactly. In fact, Hobofina's Trample makes it really good for Sank decks. True, Goblin Wizardry doesn't really work together. You want to play the second one in your main phase to trigger prowess from the first one. Yeah, that is true. Destructive Tampering, somewhat interesting sideboard card if you're really in very bad colors. Mono red might actually look at this, but it's unexciting. Crash Through, we've seen blue-red spells variants that have been extremely dedicated to casting multiple spells and getting these draws in, and getting Crash Through, if you really want to go crazy there, does help you. Creatures you control get +2/+0. We've seen some red decks try this, but it just always looks underwhelming. 6 mana 4/5 menace. When Bone Pit Brute enters the battlefield, target creature gets +4/+0 until end of turn. It's just overcosted for what you want to do with it. Witch's Cauldron. Now, Witch's Cauldron is the alternative Witch's Oven, and it's better for anything except Cauldron's Familiar, obviously. But the fact that it has a 2 mana activation cost really hampers it and pulls it out of Rakdos Sacrifice as a card you really want to look at. But and we might see this, there are other slower, grindier sacrifice decks that might become possible that will look at this as an option. I'm thinking green-black Food might get a little revival by ditching Cat and getting Witch's Cauldron and access to a bunch of extra uncommons. Walking Corpse is a Walking Corpse. Tavern Swindler. Oh, I need to remember that the cards need to be in screen. Tavern Swindler, no. Skeleton Archers, interesting for limited pretty much, unless we get some Skeleton or Archer synergy. Sanguine Indulgence, costs 3 less if you've gained 3 or more life this turn. Let's actually do it. No, I can't do it like this. I'm an idiot. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Obviously, in the deck that this is built around, I do see this happening. A Tavern Swindler is a Walking Corpse that costs 1 mana more. Yeah, I do. This is probably going to get played in that deck. It's a nice card. Reanimation. I think it's only going to get played together with Gloom Sower. But I don't think that kind of reanimation deck is really where you want to be when we'll see some really interesting tools later. Mind Rot, not good enough for Gentry. And even super dedicated discard decks can just do better than this. Masked Blackguard is a 2/1 flash that can get +1/+1. It's pretty much irrelevant. Flash has better things. Infernal Scarring. When it dies, draw a card. We have better than this. Gloom Sower. Interesting if you start reanimating it. But that's the only application, really. Isn't Titanoth, Rex, and Greater Sandworm just enough? Yeah, that's what I think as well. But this is better than Greater Sandworm, though it's harder to get in your graveyard, obviously. Feated Imp gains Death Touch. It's meh. Talit, 2 die triggers, but you get that for 1 mana or 2 mana, so why would you pay 3? The body's not interesting enough otherwise. Crypt Lurker, when it enters the battlefield, you may sack a creature or discard if you do draw a card. The fact that this is common makes it fit in that reanimation strategy and leave you with tons of uncommons available. So there might be something here, but it all looks a bit overcosted and too slow. Caged Zombie, each opponent loses 2 life. Activate this only if a creature died this turn. So again, can go in that sacrifice deck, but for that mana cost, I don't think it's going to be good enough. I wouldn't be surprised to be proven wrong on this one, though. Blood Glutton, irrelevant. Alchemist's Gift, +1/+1, choice of Death Touch or Lifelink until end of turn. This is the new, better sideboard card for Mayhem Devil. Giving Mayhem Devil Death Touch with this and going ham on the board. It's probably good enough to warrant a few sideboard slots, maybe even main board slots. I think up until now you had to pay 2 mana for this or dedicate an uncommon slot to it, which stopped people from trying to do this. The 2 mana one, Blade Brand, does draw you a card, so not sure about that. Whatever, Wishcoin Crab, Wall of Runes for the Toughness Matters deck. Vodalian Arcanist always feels too slow to me. I hope somebody proves me wrong. At 1/3 for 2 mana, it's a nice body against aggro, but meh. Tome Anima can't be blocked as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. You can do way better than that in that archetype. Rookie Mistake I find interesting, but because it has no aggressive application, I don't think it's good enough to be played. The fact that it doesn't somewhere give hexproof makes this not good enough. Roaming Ghostlight is the bigger, badder Manowar. This might get played if Blink becomes a thing, but I think I'd rather just have this on a smaller, this effect on a smaller body. 5 mana makes it pretty awkward against control decks, maybe at side against mid-range decks. That's a lot of maybes and ifs, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a roaming Ghostlight here and there, but I don't think it will be a common sight. If we get Spirit synergy at some point, that might change. Read the Tides, 6 mana sorcery, I stop reading. Opt, scry 1 draw. Opt is amazing, but it's funnily usually one of those cards that just end up getting cut when you're optimizing your deck, and often that's a mistake. Just, you heard it here first. Keen Guildmaster, 2 mana 2/1 that can give flying for 3. Underwhelming ability costs too much. Frost Breath, interesting. Sideboard card for aggro matchups, but we don't really have a dedicated blue aggro deck anymore. Capture Sphere, reprint, underwhelming, but also a bit underrated since it does handle with a lot of things, especially now with mutate stacks. Some colors have a lot of trouble interacting with those, and often those colors have Capture Sphere available to them. Still don't think it's going to get played that much, but probably should get considered. Cancel, never play it. You have 2 options that also mill your opponent, so unless milling your opponent starts looking like a disadvantage, nobody's going to play Cancel. 3 mana 03 Defender, attacking creatures you control get +1/+0. It's cool that this is at a common, but at that cost, I find it pretty underwhelming that it can't attack itself. You need to go very wide for this to be relevant. Don't think it's going to get played. Swift Response, instant, destroy target tapped creature, is definitely going to get played in white control decks. It's probably going to replace some of the blinding arrow and stuff like that, because we don't really have that much vigilant going around. So if this starts rising in popularity, start looking at threats with vigilance to blindside your opponent. Staunch Shieldmate is a 1 mana 1/3 without relevant creature types. So if you really need a sideboard card against aggro, sure, but otherwise no. Secure the Scene, exile a non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white soldier creature token. If this were an instant, I might have seen it as a 2-off on sideboards and control decks. As a sorcery, I don't think this is playable. Makeshift Battalion, or never a 2 other, put a counter on Makeshift Battalion. Wants you to overextend too much, only really works in a token deck, but doesn't really have super synergy with the rest of your deck, so don't think that's going to happen. Legion's Judgment, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater at sorcery. Probably shouldn't get played, we have better options available. Gale Swooper, 4 mana, 3/2 flying. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gains flying until end of turn. Looks like something that helps you get some reach in an aggro deck, but in that regard it is a bit underwhelming. Also dies to the sweeper, that will probably kill the creature that you could have given flying, so no. Feat of Resistance, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control against protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. This is at first glance not that interesting, but it can replace God's Willing or Al-Said of Life's Breath in some decks and clear up an uncommon slot. So I think people will look at this. Doubling the mana cost on those effects is pretty steep, so I don't think it will be super popular, but I don't think it is bad either. Feat of seems good. Oh, Feat of Resistance seems good. Yeah. Dub, no night interaction. Opening yourself up for a 2/1. Don't play this. Daybreak Charger, one of the nicest aggro additions for white decks that we've seen in quite a while. The 2 mana 3/1, nothing to scoff at. We have played this. They usually need a little something extra. This one does so in the form of giving a creature +2/+0 when it enters the battlefield. So that can be your Healer's Hawk. It really wants to curve out, so it really wants to be a 2-drop after a 1-drop, or can get played later on. So any deck that has lifelink, that has flying, and is aggressive might want to look at this. Not a relevant creature type, which really hurts it a bit though. Concordia Pegasus, underwhelming, but if you have a lot of flying synergy, might be a card you want to look at. Talking about flying synergy, we have Aven Gagglemaster. 4/3 flying for 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life for each creature you control with flying. So one of the first cards that we see that have these flying matters support. We'll see more in blue and the gold cards as well. So I think this might be relevant at some point. And I just realized that this isn't the sorted spoiler. So we're just going over this list again, I guess. Or am I missing something? I thought there was a full spoiler available. I googled, but I might have missed it. Let me just check. Transform, fit to screen. Let's have a real quick check, and otherwise we'll continue on that list. Full previews. Haha. Wait. Latest product? Full previews, you say? Pre-order, it's magic time. Few more. Jeez, how many clicks do I need to do? Okay. So let's do it sorted by color. I'll go over the ones that we already looked at a bit faster. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Let's not zoom too much anymore. Yeah, I think that should be good. Don't know if the Mythics spoiler update. Yeah, so we're in the full viewer now. And let's just, oh, wait, like these, stuck. There we go. Okay, so Alpine Watchdog, 2/2 Vigilance, nothing exciting, but there is going to be something that shows up later that might make this card interesting enough. Angelic Ascension, 2 mana instant, exile target creature or planeswalker. Its controller creates a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Some people are looking at this as a option, the flexibility of creating an attacker on your own side or getting rid of a really problematic permanent on the other side is promising, but I feel that's a bit awkward because the decks that want to try and make this early 4/4 aren't really going to be able to interact with a 4/4 on the other side as well. So you'd need to design your deck around this card, and then you sort of get stuck in a few ways. Pairing it with blue is the most interesting thing because bouncing the token is the easiest way to get rid of it. And in blue-white you have Flying Matters, so this might be a Flying Matters card. Yeah, I'd rather switch out Toss Our Heliod for a 4/4 flyer, indeed. And that is where this might be relevant. But it's rough and it takes up an uncommon slot. People are going to try it, and I do expect it slots decently well in blue-white flyers. Anointed Chorister. 1 mana, 1/1 lifelink. For 5 mana, you can give it +3/+3. I'd rather have healers, a hawk, decks that rely on lifelinkers. Pretty much just want to boost Ajani's Pridemate or any of his brothers, so I don't think this is good enough. Gagglemaster might be there if the blue-white flyers deck wants to be a bit slower. We also have some price reductions coming up later for this. Still, I think it's overcosted. Would have been great on a cheaper body. Difference between 4 and 5 mana is pretty ginormous. For 5 mana, you can also get Baneslayer Angel, which used to be insane and now looks kind of okay. The fact that it doesn't have protection from any relevant removal really hurts it. You probably don't want to be playing this in Gentry unless it's your only creature. Maybe then it can be pretty interesting. Bosri Cat. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attack this turn, create that many 1/1 silent that are tapped and attacking. You get an emblem with that at the beginning of combat. Create a 1/1, then put a +1/+1 creature on a creature you control. So, seems decent to really good in a token strategy to really boost out some extra tokens. If you curve out on turn 3, this is 2 tokens on a -2, so that's an Elspeth impression for a mana less. He doesn't really defend himself well, but he can put a lot of extra pressure. So in hyper-aggressive decks, I might see him, but there's just so many good other options for those decks. It kind of fits nicely into Lura's decks, white Lura's decks. But oh no, you can't play him, it's a permanent. Never mind. No, pretty rough. Super dedicated aggro decks might use him, but those will want to have a guaranteed amount of tokens, so that makes that second ability worse. It's just a weird kind of stress it has. Bosri's Acolyte is a 4 mana 2/3 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures you control. So that is theoretically 4/5 in power plus lifelink on the board for 4 mana. If you have some +1/+1 counter synergy, this might actually be pretty decent. As a common, that has quite a bit of impact. I wouldn't be surprised to see this. It is a bit of a win more since you already need to have 2 creatures on the board. But in a lot of matchups, you're not really gonna have to worry about sweepers that don't care about toughness. This one already has 3 toughness, so it survives all those uncommon sweepers, and the +1/+1 counters should put the other creatures out of sweep range as well if you are building your deck correctly. So, solid card, power level medium, kind of, is a little bit win more, but I don't want to dismiss it. Buzzery's Lieutenant, 4 mana, 3/4, Vigilance, protection from multicolored. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So can put one on himself as well, making this a 4/5 Vigilance protection. When Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, create a 2/2 White Knight creature token with Vigilance. This is a lot of really solid board pressure, staying power, sweeping protection. Yeah, dedicated aggro decks, wouldn't be surprised to see it. Buzzery Solidarity, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It being a sorcery really hampers this, but if we do find enough +1/+1 counter matters theme, this could get played as a center stone. It's either going to be a center stone, centerpiece, focal piece, whatever, important, or it's not going to get played at all. Celestial Enforcer, tap, activate this ability only if you control a creature with flying. 2 mana to tap, maybe, and it doesn't fly itself, and it costs 3 mana. Okay, it survives a sweeper, not gonna get played. We went over this. Containment Priest is irrelevant. Daybreak Charker is awesome. Defiant Strike's a reprint that we're still going to see in Boros aggro decks for as long as we have the 10th District Legionnaire and the Burning Prophet. So it's nice to have it, but we already had it. So dub, not good enough. Fate's Feathers. Is a new way to get rid of things. The fact that it doesn't exile like many of the other 4 mana enchantments really hampers this, but so static abilities won't get stopped by this, which really hurts it, especially as an uncommon. Falconer Adapt, whenever it attacks, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying that's tapped and attacking. At 4 mana, that's a bit high up the curve for a aggressive strategy. If we're looking at going more mid-range, it's also a bit awkward that you will want to probably pair it with something else. If we get a lot of things that trigger off creatures entering the battlefield or numbers of flyings, it's still a bit underwhelming. I don't think this is good enough. Like, it only impacts the board the turn after you play it, so pretty rough there. Feat of Resistance frees up your uncommon slots if you want to double up the costs of your Gods Unwilling, so will definitely get looked at. Gale Swooper, meh. Glorious Anthem, awesome. Every aggressive white deck should look at this. Griffin Eerie, at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, create a 2/2 white griffin creature token with flying. Yes, it is conditional, but the payoff getting a 2/2 flying, possibly every turn, is pretty large. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people build around this. On curve, it's pretty bad, since I don't see how you're going to gain 3 life and cast this on turn 2. but dedicated decks can really make something out of this. Idol of Endurance. When it enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard until Idol of Endurance leaves the battlefield. Until end of turn, you may cast a creature spell from among without paying its mana cost. So, if you're already playing a deck that put Lurrus in the deck instead of as a companion, you now have a second one as far as creatures are concerned. For that reason alone, I can see this being played, but it is a lot worse than Lurrus since it only brings back creatures. You do get a discount if you're bringing back 3 mana cost creatures, so maybe that makes this more interesting. Legion's Judgment, too bad it's a sorcery. Light of Promise turns anything into a Yanni's Pridemate, which is probably good enough to be played and push people back from splashing black to have more life gained matters cards, since there's a lot more support for the archetype coming in this set anyway. Mangara the Diplomat, whenever an opponent attacks with creatures of 2 or more are attacking you and or Planeswalker, draw a card. Cast their second spell each turn, draw a card. Cards that depend on your opponent aren't really that interesting. Play this in Commander, but leave it out of Gentry. This is not good enough. You'll start relying on it. People with they can't disenchant it. It's just, as long as you can't... This buys a lot of time. But... yeah... Now, unless you can interact with the counters, I wouldn't play this. Pack Leader, 2 mana 2/2. Other dogs you control get +1/+1. Whenever it attacks, prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn to dogs you control. So this is helps himself as well. So if you really want to play dog theme, you probably want this, but I don't see enough support for it in Gentry currently. We'll see what happens in the future though. Rambunctious Muck won't get played at 5 mana, it's just too expensive. Revitalize will get played in all these 3 life gained matter decks. That is going to be an archetype that people are going to experiment with. Outside of that, it's an interesting sideboard card if mono red does pick up enough. Ruined Halo will not get played. Sanctum of Tranquil Light is probably the worst of the shrines. All it does is help you tempo out. That's it. It will get played as the 5th shrine, maybe as a one-off, but it will get played just to get the full set going, of course. Seasoned Hallowblade is a 2 mana 3/1. Discard a card, you tap it against Indestructible. So this is the Vampire Vanguard version of this set. The one you could pay 4 life to give Indestructible. I think this one is worse. For sure, discarding a card I feel is worse, is a bigger cost, especially early game, than Vanguard. It's just that the number of times you won't need to do it because people will let this through is pretty high. The fact that this always is a 3/1, not just when it's attacking, is a big plus. So I can see it getting played. You can do it while attacking. Yes. So you can attack, and when they block, you can still do this. The tap doesn't have an effect. Will not get played. Selfless Savior. This is another replacement for Al-Said of Life's Breath because it doesn't have the activation cost. So if you really want to tighten up your deck, you can try and play this, but realize that Indestructible and Protection aren't the same things, and some effects might be favoring one over the other. Siege Striker is a 3 mana 1/1 double strike. Whenever it attacks, you may tap any number of untapped creatures you control. It gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature tapped this way. If we do get a go white token strategy, this might be interesting. This might also be interesting in a Siona version of green-white Bogles to instantly get advantage of the tokens you create when you play an aura. I don't think that's good enough than the shells that we currently have, but after rotation, wait, which set is Siona in? Is she War of the Spark? Never mind. So tokens and buffing this makes it interesting, makes it a good friend for Siona. Both are 3 drops though, and that makes it a bit awkward. Awkward. Speaker of the Heavens, 1 mana, Vigilance, lifelink, 1/1. You can create an angel token if you have if you have at least 7 more than your starting life total, and only anytime you could cast a sorcery. The first time I read this, I thought it said you had to gain 7 life this turn. It's better at, you need to be at 27 life for sure, and you can keep tapping this. So I do think some people will put that in those decks, but I also think a lot of people will be disappointed by it. It's still just a 1/1. It's very easily interacted with. Swift Response, new tool for control decks that they'll be very happy about. Tempered Veteran, 2 mana 1/2, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature with a counter on it, or 6 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. The text in between brackets is that doesn't have a counter on it, obviously. If we have enough interaction with having counters or with counters being put on, I can see this being played, but otherwise it's 2 mana intensive and far too slow. Valorous Steed is 5 power on 2 creatures, all of it vigilant. I don't think this is good enough. The decks that want this usually would like to have more pressure early on. So, no. Vryn Wingmare, if I'm not mistaken, this used to be an uncommon, which makes it pretty interesting, actually, especially in decks that want to... it's non-creature spells, also yours. So I was going to say in blue-white decks, this makes it better for counter wars, but that goes out the window pretty much. That said, this effect is one that people underestimate until it is in front of them. The fact that you can have multiple of these on the battlefield makes things even worse. And if you have, you'd want to dedicate a big part of your deck to having creature-based spells. So creatures you can sacrifice for protection, creatures you can flash in with triggered abilities to circumvent this. Don't think it's going to be good enough, but I hope somebody proves me wrong. And we talked about this. Bad. Baron. When it enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So you draw cards for bouncing your own permanents. This requires interesting bounce spells, a lot of enter the battlefield triggers. This is a bit of a build around me card, and that makes it awkward because you can only have one of them, and the deck will be pretty wonky without it, so I don't think that's going to be played. Cancel, meh. Capture Sphere, kind of meh, but sometimes is the answer you need. Discontinuity ends a turn. That's not good enough for... Well, it's good, but it's not what you want to rely on in Gentry. Enthralling Hold. Not super interesting, though I must say that with stacks of mutate creatures, people might want to look at this, especially dedicated control decks, since they usually are pretty flexible in their uncommon slots. Frantic Inventory is amazing. This is a card people sleep on tremendously. Accumulated Knowledge is a card that was printed 20 years ago that does exactly the same thing and was a mainstay in control decks back then. The second one already makes this 4 mana, draw 3 cards at instant speed, which is good. The third one makes it 6 cards for 6 mana, which makes it insane. It doesn't like to be in... It makes it interesting as well for second draw type decks, because the first one gets you your second draw in your turn, the second one gets you your second draw in the opponent's turn. So definitely going to see play. Frost Breath, talked about it. Ghostly Pilferer, underachieving rare. Jeskai Elder might be a thing, but I just don't see prowess decks currently having enough support to make this worth it. Talked about it, not good enough. This is, whenever it attacks, draw a card, kind of blows my mind. I can see this in a hyper dedicated mono blue control deck as the only creature, but that's a horrible deck and I don't even want to think about it. Otherwise it's just underwhelming. Yeah, very unlikely to see this. It'll attack once if you untap with it. Yes, but you've also paid 3 mana and skipped a turn. So, and then it dies. So you paid 3 mana to draw a card. That doesn't sound good to me. Like, you need to attack 3 times before it's better than 3 mana sorcery, draw 2 cards. Right? No. Lofty Denial, 2 mana counter target spell, and it's unless its controller pays 1. If you control a creature with flying, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4 instead. If we're playing the blue-white flyers deck, you're playing this one. Does open you up to awkward blowouts where you're casting it and in response to it they kill your only flyer. And then you'll be crying in a little corner, but other than that, pretty good. Miscast, 1 mana, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3. I don't think this will get played. Mystical Dispute is better in every way. I mean, there's so little things that Mystical Dispute doesn't do that this card wants to do, that I don't see it being played. The fact that it can't hit enchantments or planeswalkers makes this super awkward. Screen? Oh yeah, screen. Sorry. Mistral Singer is a 3 mana 2/2 flying prowess. I don't think this is good enough, but if somebody is going for that prowess deck and it does get some more extra support, I could see it being played. Opt is amazing, Pursued Whale is for commander, Reign of Revelation at common might be considered. At uncommon, you can just play Chemist's Insight, draw an extra card, but you'll be paying more, or Thirst for Meaning and discard an enchantment, so this should never ever get played. Read the Tides, 6 mana sorcery, it barely does anything. No. Rewind. Rewind is a awkward, scary card, because it's a bit of a trap. The fact that it's uncommon, it's only good if your opponent your opponent's plan is to play multiple sorcery speed threats. If this one can counter something and resolve and untap your lands and then they cast something else, it's really good. If you're in a counter war, you'll just maybe untap your lands once the stack has already been decided, causing some awkward issues. So at common, which this card was originally, this would have been pretty interesting. At uncommon, I don't think it'll ever deserve a slot. Riddle form I find very underwhelming, but people are trying to prove me wrong. So be my guest, I guess. Pretty good in the blue prowess strategy as well. Roaming Ghostlight, we talked about it. Not good enough unless we get Spirit support. Rookie Mistake doesn't give enough protection and doesn't give any offensive, so not gonna happen. Rousing Reed is a card that people will undervalue, but I don't really see a home for it currently. The draw 2 then discard is a very strong effect to have, and giving something +1/+1 and flying is super interesting as well. There might be a blue Bogles build that wants this as a hyper super angelic gift, but if you're playing blue, your creatures probably already fly, so meh. Sanctum of Calm Waters, you may draw X, where X is the number of shrines you control. If you do, discard a card. I think if people want to play shrines, it will heavily feature both green and blue colors for their shrines, so I do think this will get played. Shrines will get played. It will be a silly pet deck to some people, and it will get innovated, updated, improved throughout Gentry, because it's the kind of self-building pet deck that a lot of people enjoy building and playing with. See the Truth, not enough impact for a rare. Shacklegeist, not enough impact for a rare. We see here the first hint that there might be indeed some spirit support, so that's interesting. More really good support for the prowess deck. We used to have 5 mana 2/2s with just this ability. Now we're getting an extra power and toughness and prowess on top of that. It wants to be in a very different kind of deck where you would have seen the 2/2. And I think that for Gentry, those two concepts might be fighting a bit with each other. But other than that, this card is ridiculously good. Spined Megalodon, not good enough for the cost. It does have hexproof though, but yeah, it does have hexproof. So maybe in sideboards for control decks that are up against heavy, like black-white control discard removal heavy decks, against those this is a really solid card. It's a crazy top deck against them, but other than that, probably not going to see play. Entity is interesting again. Prowess, if that's going to be a deck, but the impact for a rare I don't think is big enough. Sublime Epiphany does all the things, and maybe in prowess might be played, but I think you want to have something that puts pressure on your opponent from your rares and mythics. Teferi, Master of Time, you may activate Teferi's abilities on any player's turn. Anytime you could cast an instant. Yes, this means you can activate Teferi, Master of Times twice per turn cycle. Once in your turn, once in your opponent's turn. That makes you need to evaluate this Planeswalker completely different. That means it will draw and discard 2 cards before your opponent can attack it. That also means you can plus it and then face something out during your opponent's turn and have your Teferi survive. That also means you get to +2 every round cycle and get to that -10 faster. I think this is definitely going to get played just as a power rare or mythic in Gentry. I don't think it will instantly replace any of the rares in decks currently, but it should definitely be considered. Do I think it's broken? No, because it doesn't generate card advantage. It's only card selection, which is a very big draw against it. And its protection for itself is pretty steep. You can only realistically do it once if you're under pressure. So the card isn't particularly good when you're under pressure, when you're in top deck situations. It's not a card that will get you back out of a very sticky situation. But if you see the window to get this through on an even board, it is a big safety net. Like it will solidify a lead. It will not undo you being behind, which is something you kind of really need from your big planeswalkers. So I'd rather have Ugin the Ineffable, and Leliana over this one, I think. But this might be the fourth rare in a Dimir deck over Lochmere Serpent. Maybe. Not a super fan of Lochmere Serpent. Teferi's Ageless Insight. If you draw a card except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. I'm expecting to see this in second draw decks. Not sure what they'll be cutting for it, but yeah, we will see this. 2 mana to loot on a bigger body, not interesting. Teferi's Tutelage. When it enters the battlefield, draw, then discard. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards. This will single-handedly revive mill as an archetype, in a viable archetype in Gentry, I think. Period. Will get played. Tide Skimmer. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures with flying, draw a card. It looks overcosted, but we know there's an uncommon coming that will make us reevaluate a lot of these like slightly overcosted looking flyers. The fact that this should have an impact the turn that you play it, and it fits in a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop sequence that will enable it, makes this pretty interesting to me. Also sweeper proof, so that is they're all good marks for this card in the blue-white flyers deck that I definitely expect to see in Gentry. I do think we'll see a few Tide Skimmers. Talarian Kraken, 6 mana 4/6. Whenever you draw a card, you may pay 1. When you do, you may tap or untap target creature. There's combo potential here for effects that rely on tapping a creature that then let you do that multiple times. So a looter that doesn't require mana can make this into a almost tutor engine, where for every mana you get to draw discard, draw discard, draw discard, draw discard. It fills up your graveyard. It looks for your specific cards. I don't know if we have a looter currently available like that. If we do, that might be a thing. When combined with the Fairy's Tutelage, draw discard, draw discard, draw discard, kills your opponent. So it's unfortunate that it's on a 6-drop, which is really, really a big investment. But it's also on a 6-drop, which has a nice body. So against the mid-range decks, this might just buy you extra time just as a body. Versus control decks, it's abysmal. So, but then versus control decks, you'll get enough time to take advantage of your tutelage. So makes it a bit awkward. Tome Anima, meh, unsubstantiate. Not a big fan. Tempo isn't good enough currently in Gentry, but this gives a lot of flexibility. And if we do see a tempo-oriented blue deck, then we might get to see this staggering inside the deck that I played would really love this, but at uncommon, it makes it really hard to fit it in. Vodalian Arcanist, just not good enough. Waker of Waves is interesting because it's both a late game finisher and a early game card advantage. Anything that fills your graveyard might be interesting for escape shenanigans as well. And the effect on there, creatures your opponent control get -1, -0, is pretty handy, but having it on a 7-drop, pretty much you need to have answered all the little dorks already by that point, or you're dead anyway. But it is a very strong ability. Wall of Runes for Butts Matter deck. Wishcorn Crap, not even good enough for Butts Matter deck. Alchemist's Gift is a more streamlined Blade brand, which is interesting for Mayhem Devil decks, but that extra draw probably puts Mayhem Devil, puts Blade Brand over Alchemist's Gift. The flexibility of having lifelink and having that +1/+1 there in a world that has a lot of effects that deal 3 damage, for me pushes Alchemist's Gift above Blade Brand in usefulness in Gentry. So I do expect it to see play, but we'll see. Archfiend's Vessel, 1 mana, 1/1 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, if it enters from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, exile it. If you do, create a 5/5 black demon token with flying. Absolutely is going to see play in any Black Lurrus Gentry deck that also plays the reanimation spell that costs 3 mana sorcery that lets you return 3 converted mana cost worth of creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is a archetype, and it's an archetype that is going to frustrate people to the point where people are probably going to call for bans. That's how strongly I feel about this card. This might actually make exile effects more relevant than they currently are. Bad Deal, unplayable. Blood Glutton, unplayable. Caged Zombie seems too slow, might get played. Carrion Grub is an interesting addition to the self-mill reanimate plan, but only if we're looking at reanimate big creatures. So, and I think that we have Blood for Bones and we have some other reanimation spells. Finding your targets can be a bit rough, but it looks like they have a lot of support in common cards at this point, which means that fitting in some alternate win-con strategy uncommons might be a thing. So wouldn't be surprised, but it looks a bit underwhelming. Like even hitting big and finding this creature, Gloomsower, it's still just an 8/5 beater. It's still... It pretty much requires a removal spell from your opponent anyway, or like you will 2-for-1 them, and that like it's still just dice to removal. So I'm not sure about this one. I'd rather pay Crypt Lurker in that slot, and that deck is going to have an overloaded 4-drop slot, since the good reanimation spells you want to cast, the Blood for Bones, are going to be 4 mana as well. But Crypt Lurker sets you up, puts the creature in the graveyard for you to reanimate, either from the battlefield or from your hand, and lets you draw a card off it. So if that deck becomes a thing, I expect Crypt Lurker to be there. It's a decently sized body against aggro decks, and it sets up your game plan for the next turn. Deathbloom Talit, not good enough. It's 2 sacrifices, but you can get 2 sacrifices for cheaper than this. Demonic Embrace, turn something into a demon, but you can do it over and over again. by discarding a card. It's actually pretty strong. It's interesting that you can recast it, but I don't feel like this is strong enough. And the impact for a rare, like if this were uncommon, yes, instantly build a deck around it. Otherwise, no. Duress, we already had Duress. Whatever, no, not whatever, it's super important, but hey, it's still here. Eliminate, I do expect to see this. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted cost 3 or less, because it kills both Narset and the uncommon, what's the mill? Ashiok, the uncommon Ashiok. Which I think might demand from control decks to play a few of these. Currently, they're playing Nightveil Predator in order to be able to put pressure earlier on these kinds of planeswalkers, but Eliminate should get played as well. Defeated Imp is crap. Finishing Blow is interesting. As an instant destroying target creature or planeswalker, I do expect to see it once or twice in main and or side for control decks, because they really need to be able to sometimes answer a big planeswalker that snuck through a counter wall. Gloomsower is going to be featured in the reanimation decks, probably, unless the reanimation decks choose to go for cycling creatures with Titanoth Rex and what's the worm? Oh my god, what's the worm again? 7 mana worm can be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Gormand looks to be a curve topper for sacrifice decks. I do feel like this it wouldn't fit in Rakdos, because Rakdos wants to be a lot faster than this, but it might have a role in a slower, probably rampy green sacrifice list, if that is going to be a thing. Outside of that, if that deck doesn't rise to popularity, I don't think this is playable whatsoever. Grasp of Darkness will get played. It competes for murder, though. So if we find ourselves in a situation where we see indestructible creatures, then we might see Grasp of Darkness more. Otherwise, I think people will just go for murder, unless the format speeds up considerably, which I don't see happening anytime soon. Grim Tutor doubles up as another copy of either your key uncommon or your rare. I don't think you want to dedicate your rare slot to that if you know that at some point we're probably getting a Diabolic Tutor back, which costs 1 mana more, is an uncommon, and doesn't cost you 3 life. So I don't think we'll see play. Hooded Blightfang. 1 for Death Touch for 3. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a Planeswalker, destroy that Planeswalker. People were trying to make Death Touch Matters decks with the uncommon Savra Planeswalker. They get to try again with an extra tool, but I still think the deck doesn't have enough to be viable. Infernal Scarring is bad. We have better auras to put on things we want to die currently. Karfek the Spiteful is really strong, but kind of need to build your deck around it. And that makes it really awkward, because it also gives your creatures -1/-1. It kind of wants to be in a Black Devotion list, I guess. So good card, but I don't really see a home for it. Kitesail Freebooter is super interesting, but you need to combine this with a lot of pressure to make the effect worth it, especially with the 2 toughness making it weak to sweepers. So unlikely to see play in Gentry, even though it's a really, really good card. Leliana, Walker of the Dead, 4 mana, 4 loyalty, plus each player discards a card, each opponent who can't loses 3 life. So it becomes a finisher in discard decks, which is interesting. Losing 3 life per turn is a pretty big swing for those decks. Target creature gets -X, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. Yeah, and -7, you get an emblem with at the beginning of combat on your turn. Put target creature card from graveyard onto the from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. That's a killer emblem. So I do think that if you are going for, like, if you're picking Davriel to put in your deck, you probably want to have Leliana be Davriel's buddy. Will get played because people like playing these kinds of decks. The Lily art seems too kind for her. I kind of agree, yeah. Leliana's Devotee is a 3 mana 2/3. All zombies you control get +1/+0. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you may pay 1 and black. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. I think this is good enough to be in a build around deck. Yeah, people will try this. If we get more zombies at some point in the future, which is pretty likely, it's a very common creature type, this will rise in stock very, very quickly. Leliana Standard Bearer, 3/1 flash for 3. When it enters the battlefield, draw X, where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. It's interesting. It's a burst of card advantage. If you have free sacrifice outlets, you can manipulate this, but I do feel that you want rares that have more impact than this. Leliana's Steward, 1 mana, 1/2, sack it, target opponent discards a card, activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Burglar Rats is just better, you get to sacrifice it for other stuff. If you have stuff that really hard triggers on sacrificing, this might be interesting, comes down a turn earlier. It's better to block tokens with. Is a zombie, so has a relevant creature type. Yeah, might be played, will be played in this Devotee deck because it's its own trigger, it doesn't cost anything, and it gets replaced by a 2/2 zombie that is a 3/2 zombie. So these two good buddies. Malefic Scythe, when it enters with a soul counter on it, equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each soul counter. When equipped creature dies, and that's an important one, put a soul counter on Malefic Scythe. That makes this very awkward because you need to constantly invest mana to grow it, and you need to be putting it on crappy cards in order to build it up for later. It seems a lot of work for something that doesn't do enough. I don't think this is a very good card. I do think people are going to play it, and in the right sequence it's going to be looking ridiculously powerful, but it's a bad top deck. It makes you spend time ramping it up, and in the end it's going to get returned to nature if it really becomes problematic. So self-sack, yeah, but there isn't that much self-sack currently, and you're still equipping this thing onto something with the purpose of sacrificing it and then equipping it onto something else. So unless you want to be going mid to late game, it's just going to be, you're going to waste too much mana and time building this up. It gets good pretty fast, don't get me wrong. Like if you get 2 counters on this, it's scary as hell, but it's I don't know. It's going to get played. I am going to lose against it, but I think people are overvaluing how good this card is. Unplayable. Massacre Worm, This is insane. The number of people that I've seen dying because this ability resolves is astronomical. Also fits nicely into black devotion deck, so probably going to get played. It's a good reanimation target as well, so fits in a lot of different decks. Demir Control, black devotion, reanimate. Art is awesome on Massacre Worm. Yeah, it's the classic art. It's been that art since what? How old is this card? I think it's from 99 originally. Mind Rot, meh. Necromancia, probably meh. The fact that they get a bunch of tokens makes it awkward. Just probably play Unmoored Ego. Peer into the Abyss, 7 mana, sorcery. Target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life. Round up each time. I don't think this card is a good idea and you should not play it. Pestilent Haze. Looks better than it actually is. I don't think the upside of playing this to take some loyalty counters off Planeswalker is all that good. You need to have pressure on Planeswalkers to make them minus. And if you have pressure on them, you're probably not playing a deck that wants to have this kind of card. So pretty awkward. Rise Again is the reanimation. It's common, but at 5 mana, it's probably going to sit by the wayside to Blood for Bones, but I might see a few to complement Blood for Bones. Sanctum is a shrine, so it will get played. It's also your victory condition, so Sultai seems to be a great base for the shrine deck. Sanguine Indulgence, pretty awesome in the life gain deck if these players are going to go with black as well. If they do, Silver Smoked Ghoul is a very good card. It's a card draw engine for you, but it is a bit mana intensive. Will get played if a black version of the gain 3 life deck is there. Skeleton Archer, no. Tavern Swindler is a walking corpse. Thieves Guild Enforcer, not enough impact for rare. Village Rites will definitely 100 million billion% get played in Rakdos Sacrifice, in Orzhov Sacrifice. Any Luras deck that plays black mana will want this card. This used to be a 2 mana card, and now it's a 1 mana card, and I already was happily playing this at 2 mana. Yes, insane. Probably will also look creepy as all fuck foil with the glowy eyes. So that's another plus. Will get played. Get me foils. Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Creatures you control gain life link until end of turn. Super interesting for black-white life gain decks. Alternate win condition in there. Not too impressive in its own right, but it's interesting early game and can be a finisher late game. So I do think this is going to get played. Like, couple this with a Ajani Sprite Mate, and things get pretty scary. Will get played in the black-white deck. Walking Corpse is a Walking Corpse. Witch's Cauldron is interesting, but currently our sacrifice decks are very tempo-oriented, and that activation cost will hinder that. I might see a green-black sacrifice shell that does more and can get away with taking this extra time, but it's pretty iffy, and otherwise it's just too slow. Witch's Oven plus Cat Oven plus Cauldron Familiar is a really strong engine to have, especially if you have things that trigger off of it. But getting this one allows you to get enough advantage of sacrificing anything instead of just your cat, and thus allows you to eliminate the cat. from your deck and be more open to other things. Don't know if that is good enough, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this pop up in a very slow advantage grindy deck. Does that sound like something I want to play already? Because it is. Red, Battle Rattle Shaman. Nice effect, but the body just isn't there. 4 mana also puts it just above that curve you want to be in a red deck. Might play Lampent, yeah. Bolt Hound should deal 3 damage on its own. That's a very, very big oversight. Here's the cat, by the way. So I feel like there's a bit of a design mistake. Is it good though? 3 mana, 2/2 haste. Whenever it attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. That is interesting, but it does compete with Cavalcade in its slot, and I think Cavalcade is better. Bone Pit Brute is too expensive. Brash Taunter, not enough impact. Burn Bright, sometimes interesting, but rarely to never played. Chandra, Heart of Fire. Maybe in a big red deck might get played, but otherwise it's rather awkward. Chandra's Incinerator creates too much stress. You shouldn't play it. Chandra's Rage Mutt deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. If you manage to trigger off this or amplify that damage easily, it might get played. Otherwise, it's just not good enough unless we see very heavy planeswalker decks suddenly re-emerge into the meta game, but since we haven't had them when War of the Spark was in there, I don't think it's going to be that good. It's a dog, yeah. Chandra Spiraling is a bad Chandra Spitfire. The flying on Chandra Spitfire is actually super, super important. So don't really see this being played until Spitfire leaves. Snoop, not good enough. Crash Through might get played in these super devoted draw 2 lists, but I don't see that happening now. Destructive Tampering is an interesting sideboard card for mono red. Hey Lola. She just bit me. Where are we? Destructive Tampering, Double Vision. No, keep going. You're not welcome here for 2 minutes. By then you forgot that I was angry at you and it doesn't matter anymore. Double Vision is 5 mana enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. I can see this being played in Wilderness Wreck. Yeah, in Wilderness Reclamation this can be pretty ridiculous and fun. So because it's fun, it will probably get played, probably by Emma and or me. Firely Emanciation is triples in damage. This is just, it feels like overkill. Effects that want to double damage, you want to have them earlier. Torbran pretty much does the same thing in most scenarios, so I don't think this will get played. It doesn't do anything the turn you play it. Furious Rise is a reprint, will get played. Fury of the Bitten might get played. It really gives you extra pressure while giving you a sneaky way to get blockers or utility creatures away. Godrak the Crown Surged, can't attack unless you control 4 or more artifacts. At the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. This might be good in Rakdos Sacrifice. It's probably pretty good in Rakdos Sacrifice because your oven and your food also helps you get this guy into action. In the meantime, it's blocking and it's creating treasure tokens for you to sacrifice. There's a lot of competition in that deck for rare slots though, and I think he might not make the cut because of that. Goblin Arsonist is an extra Footline Fiend, which is super nice. Wizardry is super interesting in spell decks, but as Ubabakis already mentioned, you kind of want to start casting things in your own turn as soon as you have these, which probably fights with how you build your deck a bit. Havoc Jester is an oversized Mayhem Devil, but it doesn't require you to play black. Is that good enough? I'd rather have this effect on a cheaper body, but I do expect to see this to complement Mayhem Devils from time to time as a 1 or 2 off, if you have the uncommon slots for it. Heartfire Immolator, 2 mana, 2/2 prowess. That's pretty nice. Sacrifice it. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker. And it doesn't rotate. Yeah, that's true. Mayhem Devil is, and then this will be the one that you'll be stuck with. But I don't think that the deck might not survive rotation without Mayhem Devil. We'll see. Deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker. It's a nice aggressive drop, and I can see this being pretty interesting. But it seems a bit awkward than fighting against yourself. Punisher, you're just never going to be able to get this out. Hobble Fiend might be that extra sacrifice outlet that aggressive sacrifice decks need. Getting something on board that grows bigger and has trample is pretty good against damage-based removal spells. And it sneaks under counter spells, which makes it pretty good against a lot of decks. Ignis Cur is a 2 mana fire breather. People will underestimate what this dog can and will do, and I do expect it to see play. Especially goes really well together with Cavalcade as well. Kinetic Auger, 4 mana, X4, trample, power equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. When it enters the battlefield, discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. So this is a much easier to cast non-flying but trampling Crackling Drake that has more flexibility for you in its ability. That might be good enough, but it is fighting for so many cards in its slot that I don't really see it happening. Ogre is meh, but you might need it for 4 power matters, even though we're getting some very nice support cards for that archetype. Pitchburn Devils is overrated. Sanctum of Shattered Heights, again, interesting for the Shrine deck, and it is the Shrine that allows you to make things out of extra shrines you've drawn. It will get played because people will want the 5 shrines, but I'm not super impressed by it. I'd rather just discard them to the blue one and have more removal in my deck. Scorching Dragonfire, super awesome, but you don't really care because it's in the same standard rotation. Shock is shock and shock is amazing. Soul Seer doesn't really do that much that we currently can't do, and we haven't really seen that much indestructible. It lets you kill a Thassa though, doesn't it? And that's pretty nice. Lets you kill all the gods. So if you're really sick and tired of Thassa and Heliod, you now have an answer that also kills a bunch of other things for you. Spellgorger weird, just not good enough. Subira Tulzidi Kavaner. Jesus, what? Like, all those words don't make sense. Caravaner. I'm just an idiot. Okay. 3 mana, 2/3 haste, that's nice. Another target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked, that's nice. Discard your hand until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Very nice, but I think a bit too low impact for a rare. Sure Strike is meh. Terror of the Peaks is a really solid creature. 5 mana, 5/4 flying. Spells your opponent cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. So a nice curve topper in a more mid-ranged red deck. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Things die when you untap with this. Probably your opponent. So again, in a more mid-range red deck, pretty insane. Fits in 4 power decks as well, I suppose. Thrill of Possibility is played, will get played because it's in the standard rotation elsewhere. Traitor's Greed is a bad act of treason for Gentry. Transmogrify. Exile target creature that creature control reveals cards until they reveal a creature card. That player puts that card onto the battlefield and shuffles the rest into their library. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with it, but as a rare you can't rely on it. So impossible in Gentry, but look, might be fun in standard. Turn 2 Slag does irrelevant things for us currently. Torrent Ogre won't get played. Unleash Fury. I think most of the times you would rather have things deal double damage, but I'm sure there are niche areas where doubling the power of a creature does more. So we'll see. Doesn't look good enough, especially as an uncommon. Volcanic Geyser will definitely get played in Wilderness Reclamation. Volcanic Salvo, X less, where X is the total power of creatures you control. Deals 6 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalker. That for a rare, I don't think that it has enough impact. The only deck that might want to play this is like 4 power matters, but they just ram through to do this, so nah, don't see it happening. Azusa Lost but Seeking, super interesting card, but not in Gentry. Yeah, and it doesn't go face, indeed. Burfist Oak, no. You need to do more. Canopy Stalker 4/2 must be blocked if able. If it dies, you gain 1 life for each creature that died this turn. Not enough impact for an uncommon, I think, unless you have very big cat synergy going. Colossal Dreadmaw, definitely going to see play. Every deck will play 4 of these. People will start splashing green just to have Colossal Dreadmaw. It is that good. Cultivate, interesting in position in ramp, but you really want to cast this on turn 2 to really make it worth it. Casting this on turn 3 is just such a gap in your development that against aggressive decks you'll really struggle. So if you're playing this with Grazer and you're hoping Llanowar Elf gets printed in the next set. Drowsing Pteranodon, 2 mana defender, 3/3. As long as you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it can attack as though it didn't have defender. No, don't play this. It's only playable in the 4 power matters deck, and that wants to be attacking with their stuff. Elder Gargaroth is pretty good. It's pretty insane, but it's unfortunate that it needs to attack or block in order to start having its impact. If your deck is dedicated around giving stuff haste, this becomes a lot better. So yeah, Rhythm of Nature or Rhythm of the Wild makes this deck a lot better, but you probably have better picks than another big creature. Cultivate Alt Art is rare, the way to have 8 rares in a Gentry, true. Feline Sovereign. Other cats get +1/+1 and have protection from dogs. Whenever one or more cats you control deal damage to a player, destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment that player controls. I haven't looked into cats as a archetype too much yet. We didn't see much support in white for cats, so I don't think it is currently good enough. There are plenty of good cats currently, so Kahira cats might want this and go pretty bonkers. Fierce Empath, super interesting to have in your ramp decks, so that will definitely make certain getting creatures in your ramp deck in your rare slots much more interesting, because otherwise you probably just want some of the green planeswalkers. Fungal Rebirth, 3 mana, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If a creature died this turn, create 2 sapling tokens. I like in the green black sacrifice deck, this probably gets played, but I find this a very awkward card and hard to estimate how good it is. It looks good to me, but I don't know. Garruk Unleashed, 4 mana, 4 loyalty, +1 up to 1 target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. Create a 3/3 beastie. Then if an opponent controls more creatures than you, put a loyalty counter on Garruk, and -7 is a emblem. At the beginning of your end step, you may search your library for a creature, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. This planeswalker only works really if you are ahead and want to keep pushing ahead. Even -1 to make a 3/3 beast doesn't really help you that much, because you have to have less creatures than your opponent left. So this just feels underwhelming when you're behind. When you're ahead, though, I think this is pretty insane. It puts a lot of pressure on your opponent, puts a lot of pressure on their planeswalkers with that trample on the plus ability. And if you do get to your ult, you just eventually win the game. So I don't think it's good, but it's really strong as a win more card. Garrix Gorehorn, interesting vanilla creature, 7 power on 5 mana, is nothing to scoff at. Again, if you're a Rhythm of Nature deck, this is a very scary card to have in your deck list. I don't think it's good, but it's scary for sure. Garrix Harbinger, 3 mana, 4/3, hexproof from black. That's already pretty nice stats. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may reveal a creature card or Garruk planeswalker from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Since it doesn't have evasion or trample, that is a bit awkward. It has 3 toughness. It has hexproof from black though, and it might sneak under a counter wall from your opponent, and at that point you just kill Dimir control. So very, very niche. I don't think it's good enough, but I wouldn't fault anyone for playing this if they're really, really, really tired of losing to Dimir control. Garruk's Uprising is a 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Creatures you control have trample. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So this is fighting with Uprising and what's her name? Korea? The uncommon planeswalker that lets you draw a card whenever you play a creature. This gives trample, but doesn't let you untap things. Uprising triggers once every turn. If you have a creature, this only triggers when you play a new one. I do feel like this is better than Uprising because it does something probably when you play it. It does something faster when you play it and can draw into multiple cards. But you need to keep casting and resolving spells to keep getting spells from this, which makes it pretty awkward. Once we hit post-rotation and the Planeswalkers is gone, then this and Uprising will be in the deck. Gnarled Sage, overcosted. Heroic Intervention, underpowered for a rare. Hunter's Edge, overcosted for the effect. Invigorating Surge, put a +1/+1 counter, then double the number of counters on that creature. I think it is too much win more. It's a one-shot Hydra's growth, 2 turns in 1. Yes, I get that. But if that doesn't kill your opponent, then things get really awkward. So not a fan. It will get played and it will blow out people. And you can probably build a deck around getting more blowouts with this. Jolrel, whenever you draw your second card, each turn create a 2/2 green cat creature token. It's not in the color that really aims at doing this, but there is some support. It's hiding over here already, so we might be seeing this card. It feels a bit underwhelming, but if it sticks and it stays around, then it's a very scary card that can just get swept away with all the work it's done with a single Cry of the Carnarium. So, no. Life goes on. Sideboard card if mono red becomes insane. Llanowar Visionary is decent. I think I like this better than Cultivate in ramp decks because it is a somewhat decent play on turn 3. If you're playing this, you're playing Grazer. No discussion, because playing this on turn 2 is so much better. Following this up with a 5-drop on turn 3 is insane and should be what you strive for if you're playing this card. Ornery Dipsaur sucks. Porculus Vine probably doesn't have the support or is in the color that really can play off it. Pride Malkin, if +1/+1 counters are impactful enough, will get played because of its second ability more than actually putting a counter. Primal Might, target creature you control gets +X/+X, then it fights up to one target creature you don't control. Seems underwhelming for a rare. But yeah, it's a scary finisher, especially if you're playing a bunch of tramplers then or big creatures anyway. This will just straight up kill opponents. Quirion Dryad used to be a rare, has been played in Vintage, and you can definitely build a deck around this, but it just becomes probably Temur Spells, and I think Temur Spells can do better things than just grow a big creature that doesn't even have evasion or trample. Ranger's Guile is the green counterspell that they have been craving for a while now, and single-handedly makes ramp decks and green-based Bogle decks better. This is Green's God's Willing that also gives +1/+1. This is very, very good. This makes all the green rampy, all the green Bogles decks a tier better. Return to Nature is good. Run Afoul is interesting, but at this point in Gentry, I probably would prefer to have Plummet, so he can actually kill the Crackling Drake next to his fairy brothers. Saber-Tooth Molar, 4 mana, 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died, put a +1/+1 counter on Saber-Tooth Molar and untap it. If that green-black sacrifice theme gets through, this might be in there, but I am a bit underwhelmed. Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest will get played in the Shrine deck, and seems like the one that will lead to the sudden blowout matches with Shrine decks, like getting another one before this one, and then the turn after dropping 2 shrines, or going ham with 5 or 6 mana is really, really strong. Scavenging Ooze won't get played. It's very good. Yeah, it is very good, but there's not enough graveyard interaction in Gentry to make this relevant. It can grow out of control, don't get me wrong, but then it's still just a big creature without evasion. I mean, it gives you utility, it gives something big. So a deck that has Ranger's Guile probably can look at Scavenging Ooze, but I think you'll always want to take some big Vivian creatures instead. Self-sacrifice decks though, yeah, but self-sacrifice, you've said this a few times now, but self-sacrifice is bad unless it tries to achieve something, and just like achieving a big creature doesn't really help you ahead. I mean, you're doing a bunch of things to throw things in the graveyard to then eat them. The effects you're getting from the self-sacrifice just isn't good enough, and even if you get this up to a 10/10, you'll need to keep protecting it, and it still gets jump blocked up the wazoo. So no, you should play Vivians and other scary planeswalkers over another creature. There's plenty of uncommon good creatures to play over Scavenging Ooze. Citizen Training, awesome card, especially because it gives trample, but don't underestimate the drawing a card. Skyway Sniper just doesn't do enough fast enough to keep track with the decks that are making flying tokens, so not that interesting. Snare Spinner is probably a better card against those decks because it's a common, but it misses that 1 power to really be good enough in the meta game. Sporeweb Weaver, 3 mana, 1/4 rare, reach hexproof from blue. Whenever it is dealt damage, you gain 1 life and create a 1/1 green Suprolling creature token. There's build around me potential, but you really don't want to get into that. Thrashing Brontodon, awesome body, great utility, but often hard to fit into your deck, because there's just better utility that you want to have in your deck. Titanic Growth doesn't really get played because green just has better ways to pump stuff. Track Down is the blue Ponder. Yes, it can whiff and not find anything, but then probably you misbuilt your deck a bit, and you shouldn't have played this. Truffle Snout enters the battlefield, choose 1, put a +1/+1 counter on itself, so not like the Malkin gets to put something on something else or gain 4 life. I think you want the cat, what's his name again, Pride Malkin, over Truffle Snout until Mono Red becomes insane. Hakuna Matata indeed. Warden of the Woods, 6 mana for a 5/7 vigilance. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw 2 cards. No, don't. Maybe in ramp you can play this, but I'm not super excited about it. Wildwood Scorch, if you're playing the +1/+1 counter theme, you are probably playing this guy as well. It's pretty insane with Hydra's Growth, obviously. And Ivy Elemental and this one are two very, very big buddies. Like, you toss this in as a 3/3 on turn 4 and play a 4/4 Ivy Elemental on turn 5 and attack with a 7/7 Wildwood Scorch. Feels pretty good. You still need to have some evasion there, but I'm guessing you're playing mono green auras with Setestan Training and growth, Hydra's growth anyway, so lose gain. Alpine Hound Master is when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Alpine Watchdog, that's a 2/2 Vigilance, and a Ignis Cur, that's the 1/2 Fire Breather. Reveal them, put them into your hand, and shuffle your library. When it attacks, it gets +X+0, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. So in a hyper-aggressive deck that focuses heavily on just card advantage grindy things, it's okay. It single-handedly forces a Cry of the Carnarium, but I'm not a big fan, actually. Since the two, if you play this on turn 2, you also can't play both of them on turn 3, so you need other stuff. You need a bunch of 1-drops, and you really open yourself up to Cry of the Carnarium. Yeah, but it's an amazing top deck. I don't know. I think people are going to play it, and I think it's going to be underwhelming most of the time. Conclave Mentor probably is the most archetype defining card in this set. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1 are put on it instead, and when Conclave Mentor dies, you gain life equal to its power. So this might... Yeah, people will play this. There's currently different versions of decks that this suits into, but the fact that it doesn't have the snake's ability to proliferate -1/-1 counters, for example, does hurt this. So it's good. It only has 2 toughness though, and it is going to get played, and it is going to suffer in the current meta game. Direfleet Warmonger, 3 mana, 3/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, +2/+2 and trample. If you have enough fodder there, this is an amazing amount of pressure to put on your opponent. If you can give it haste, but that's pretty hard to do in red and black, that makes it a lot worse. But I can see this being a thing in a Fire Artist Direfleet Warmonger aggro version, auto sacrifice, Rakdos sacrifice deck. Evening, dropping for a good night here after hanging out at Warts. Oh, is Triforcer also streaming? So a different version of Rakdos sacrifice, a lot more aggressive. We'll see if it actually comes to being. Experimental Overload creates a XX blue and red weird, where X is the number of instant and sorceries. Then you may return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, exile it. This is your big finisher in sorcery only Omori. I don't know. I thought this was good, but the more I look at it, the more awkward it seems. It's still just a dumb big creature. And now someone smart can tell pointers instead of silly me. Hey, you've been contributing. Indulging Partition, 3 mana, 1/4, flying lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. This puts pressure on your opponent, but I think if you're in this archetype, you'd rather want to be in the card advantage generating enablers rather than the finisher ones. This is going to get played by people that go for a more aggro approach, but it just feels a little bit awkward in that regard to gain life to be more aggro. Leafkin Avenger is a 4-mana 4/3. Adds green for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, and for 8 you can deal probably 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. Pretty much only fits into the 4 power matters deck, and that is very pinched on uncommons as it is. We'll try that overload though, all spells with fling. Yeah, that's definitely a plan. Partition is good, having 4 toughness. Yeah, but and then what? You're gonna start blocking with it? Then you're not really achieving much. So I'm not a big fan of it like this. Lore Scale Quattle. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Lore Scale Quattle. I want this to be good. But it requires so much protection. That said, it's an early game card that forces your opponent to interact, or it grows out of control, and it can be a late game card that that can be really annoying. Stick Light of Patrician on it. I mean, then you're just asking for a 2-for-1. Now you're protecting this, and for what? Just to have a slightly higher pressure. I mean, it becomes, you can. I'd rather put that thing on a healer's hawk, to be honest, and diversify my threats than putting everything in one basket. Nyambi, 2-mana 2/1 flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, you gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost. Discard a legendary, draw 2 cards. This is not for Gentry. Obsessive Stitcher, 3-mana 0/3, draw then discard, sacrifice, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is the big reanimation deck if it ever gets there. The problem in Gentry is that it usually wants rare targets to reanimate, otherwise things get awkward. The 2 cycling biggies, Titanoth Rex and the Worm, that are the go-to targets for reanimation, don't really suit in these colors unless you go Sultai, and I don't know, at that point you might as well go Ramp. Any news on the Braden event, or waiting till next week? Because after hitting Ward's sub-target yesterday, there should be cake. That there is most likely going to be a Braden event. I just don't know yet how much it's going to cost me. Yeah, waiting on confirmation from Andy, but should be secure. Indeed, Reanimate will get there. I will accept no constructive criticism. Go for it, someone. Radha, Heart of Kelt. As long as your turn, it has first strike, 3/3 first strike. You may look at the top card of your library. You may play lands from the top. Gets +X/+X, where X is the number of lands you control. I just don't see enough impact for it. Don't think it will get played. You want to diversify your rares in those colors. Sanctum of All will get played because shrines will get played because people will be silly and try to have fun with this. So yeah, will get played. And if it resolves, it's pretty strong. Twinblade Assassins is the card that, if it comes to fruition, will make green-black sacrifice decks playable. But I'm afraid that putting it on a more expensive card with a bigger body is actually hurting this ability. We already have it on an enchantment that's also 5 mana. So I think it's a pipe dream that won't come true. Then we have Watcher of the Spheres. This is the second. This, according to me, is the single most impactful card for Gentry as far as spurring a new meta game goes. You can build multiple different decks around it. Both go wide decks or just focus on Fairy Vandal and different utility and protection creatures. The fact that this also is a viable threat makes it really interesting. So you can go 4-drop flyers and make sure that the follow-up to Watcher of the Spheres is really good, or infinite 2-drop flyers and make sure that your first attack with Watcher of the Spheres is with a 5/5. So different options will get played. And then we have Eugene, the insta slot in every control deck. And probably in every Ram deck as well. And it's going to win so many games. Eugene. Blue-white flying is already uncommon heavy. That is definitely correct. Chromatic Orrery. I don't think this is going to get played. It's a super cool card. Chrome Replicator might revive the blue artifact archetype. Epitaph Golem really needs support for something being on the bottom. Don't think it'll get played. This is crap. This is underwhelming. This is pretty bad. Palladium Mir might fit into a ramp strategy, but I feel like it's a bit underwhelming. Also dies to Cry of the Carnarium. So might, but I don't think so. Prismite, pretty bad. Short Sword works well with Mentor, but we tried it last time it was legal and it didn't really work out, so don't expect anything from it. This is currently legal and is barely being played. Sky Scanner is also a big boon for the artifact deck, so if that deck does pop up, it probably will have Sky Scanners. Solemn Simulacrum is great utility, but it's not what you want from your rare slots. Spark Hunter Masticore really puts a lot of pressure on Planeswalkers. Obviously, that's kind of its job. But I do think that it doesn't put enough pressure in a wide range of opponents for it to justify a rare slot. I do think it will get played by some people that are sick and tired of losing to Planeswalkers, but I don't think it will be correct. Tormod's Crypt, as an uncommon, will not get played unless we get some really strange shifts in the metagame. Common lands are back. They're amazing. They're a cornerstone of Gentry. We get to keep them. That's cool. Animal Sanctuary, not interesting enough probably to be played. I think any of the only decks that I think might consider this are cat and dog decks at this point, and I think I don't think dog decks will be good enough, and cat decks have enough other rares they want to play, I think. Fable Passage, just no. Radiant Fountain is actually quite interesting for the white life gain decks. So I do think this will get played. Temples are back again. You won't play them in Gentry. They're just not good enough. And then basic lands. You're definitely going to play basic lands. There's a lot of reprints available. You can pretty much choose which ones you like best. There's not really any iconic arts, though I must say this one, the John Avon art, is pretty sentimental to me, because this was my favorite Plains art when I played at the Pro Tour. So I played this Art of Planes in my Pro Tour top 8. That's a trivia for you to have. If you actually made it this far, you are a lunatic, but still I want to thank you for your time. If you did like it somehow, feel free to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, because we do make some things that are actually interesting.